Welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1996 Menendez brothers retrial. We are reading through the transcript because unfortunately we don't have video because that was Stanley Weisberg, the judge, Judge Weisberg's decision in the second trial not to allow cameras, and also he didn't allow a lot of the evidence for the brothers to come in regarding the maltreatment that they suffered as children. So, by the hands of their parents, Kitty and Jose, who they are on trial for their homicides. So, this is the second trial, 1993. They had their first trial, ended in a mistrial. There's a lot of differences. We've streamed through the first trial. Now we're reading the transcript, and we are on part 28 of the state's case, and we're very, very close to the end. We are on the last three witnesses, and technically Detective has already testified. He's just being recalled for one of the days. So there's only three people we're going to hear from, which is this pathologist. We have another medical professional, and then we have um, Detective Zoller. So those are the last three for the state, and then we will get to the defense's case. However, just FYI, this pathologist and the other medical person is going to be on the stand for a little while. So we've got a couple parts to get through. So without further ado, let's get started. And um, this is sorry, we're on Tuesday, November 7th, 1995. We're starting at the beginning of the day because we finished off with this particular witness on the stand still. And was that the weekend? I can't remember. No, I think no, we're on Tuesday. Sorry. All right. So the court says, all right, in the trial, everybody is here and we'll start up. Ms. Abramson says, Your Honor, I just want the court to know that I am here, but I'm not feeling well. I am here and I'm determined to finish with Dr. Lawrence because he's from out of town, but I may ask periodically for breaks. The court says, Okay, let me know. Ms. Abramson says, Okay. The jury enters the courtroom and the following proceedings are held. The court says, The jury is here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready to resume. We have the witness on the witness stand. Would you state your name again for the record? And he does. It is Robert Don Lawrence, and he spells his name. All right. The court says, and we'll continue the cross-examination. Ms. Abramson says, "Thank you, Your Honor." Dr. Lawrence, before we broke yesterday, you had indicated that you had brought some portion of the file with you down from Stockton. Do you have that with you now? Yes. All right. Have you had an opportunity since yesterday to look through the file again? Yes. And is everything that you received from the prosecution, with the exception of the 180 photographs, in that final? No, the transcript of Dr. Golden's testimony is not there. Turning to that for a moment, you were not clear yesterday about whether the transcript that was provided to you was of Dr. Golden's testimony before the county grand jury or was of his testimony at the first trial. Are you still not clear on that point? Well, I think I said that I thought it was the grand jury. I didn't know if there was one or not of the trial. Well, you understand, do you not? You've testified before grand juries, haven't you? Yes. And in a grand jury proceeding, only the prosecution is present, not the defense. You understand that? Usually, yes. At least in my experience, that's true. It's not usually, that's how it goes. So let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that that's legally correct and that only the prosecution appears at grand juries. Okay? Yes, because that is what happens. The defense has no opportunity to defend themselves at a grand jury, which is, I don't understand why we do grand juries. They were designed for like specific instances, and yet we do them all the time, and they're so unfair. But anyways, so she says, let's just assume, for the sake of argument, that that's legally correct. Okay, he says. All right. And therefore, since there's no defense there, there's no defendant, no defense counsel, there's no cross examination. That's correct. All right. In the transcript that you were provided, was there any cross examination of Dr. Golden? I really don't remember. Do you remember the substance of Dr. Golden's testimony before that, whether it was the grand jury or the trial? Oh, yes, I paid close attention to everything that was said and decided whether or not I agreed with it and so forth. And you decided whether or not you agreed with it after you saw the photographs. I received the transcript after the initial materials so that I had reviewed the autopsy reports and the photographs before reading the transcript. And in those autopsy reports, you now have them with you, do you not? Yes. You also received the amendment that Dr. Golden prepared for those reports? Yes. And it's true, is it not? There are a total of 3 amendments to the report. I received one amendment for each of the 2 autopsies. And the amendment that you received for each of the 2 was in a 1995 amendment. I'll have to check the report to refresh my memory. It was dated the 25th of September, 1995. So, 6 years after the crimes. I take it then that you didn't receive his 1992 amendment. No. And could you just tell us what are the documents apart from that testimony which you didn't bring, which comprise your file in this case? I have the amendment that we just talked about. The 1995 amendment, correct? Yes, I have the 2 autopsy reports dated August of 1989. I have a copy of the report that I generated for the district attorney's office about 2 weeks ago, and I have the color reconstruction diagrams from failure analysis. You don't know if they're reconstruction diagrams or just illustrations, do you? I don't understand your question. Well, when Mr. Khan asked you if you had seen those diagrams, he called them illustrations. I just called them reconstruction diagrams. And do you know how they were created? No. And I think you've already indicated you don't know who created them. That's correct. Now, you testified yesterday that you had spoken to someone called Devender Grewal at Failure Analysis Associates. Is that correct? Yes. Did you speak to anyone else at that company? Yes, I spoke to Mr. McCarthy later on in the telephone conversation. Oh, or Dr. McCarthy, that's who we're going to hear from next. So, uh, this is important stuff. So, when you say later on, when was it that you first spoke to Dr. McCarthy? I would say it was about a week ago. A week ago? You're testifying today and you just talked to the doctor a week ago. Was that before or after you and I spoke, Dr. Lawrence? I'm sorry, I can't recall. It was pretty much around the same time. That's sus, don't you think? If he's talking to the lawyer and something the lawyer said might have sparked him to contact this Dr. McCarthy. Well, if I indicate to you that you and I spoke on October 26, 1995, and today, good question, what day is today? The court says November 7th. Thank you, Your Honor. Today is November 7th. Can you give me an estimate of when in between those 2 dates you spoke to Dr. McCarthy? No, I don't remember. I'm sorry. At the time that I spoke to you, do you recall indicating to me that the only person you had spoken to at failure analysis was Devender Grewal? I don't recall that. If that's what I said, then I probably talked to him after you. And it's your understanding that Dr. McCarthy is not a medical doctor as well. Is that correct? Or do you know that? I don't know. I don't know what type of doctor he is. I don't know if it's an MD or a PhD. So you don't know what his experience is at all? No. If I told you his experience is in mechanical engineering, that's the guy, sorry, not medical, he's a mechanical engineer. If I told you his experience is in mechanical engineering, that doesn't ring any bells? Well, I just told you I don't know what his experience is, so I don't know which bell you'd be trying to ring. Oh, getting kind of quippy there with his words. Do you believe he might be a forensic pathologist? I don't think so. Well, you obviously testified you didn't think failure analysis had a forensic pathologist on staff. Is that correct? No, I said that I doubted that they did in response to. So you talked to Dr. McCarthy about what? There was a conference call, and the purpose of the call was to assess the medical findings in comparison to the reconstruction scenario created by failure analysis. And Dr. McCarthy was particularly interested to know if there were any medical findings that would be inconsistent with his concept of how the shots occurred and so forth. And the gist of the conversation was, I'm not asking you what the gist was. I want to know if, let me ask you this. Were you talking to Dr. McCarthy about medical matters? Yes. And were you talking to him about medical matters without ascertaining whether or not he had any medical training? Correct. So Dr. McCarthy is in the courtroom right now, isn't he? Yes. And so is Mr. Grewal, isn't he? Yes. Do you know what they're doing here? I presume they're here to testify or to provide exhibits. Well, aren't they here to listen and to see what I do with you on cross examination? Mr. Khan says, objection calls for speculation, sustained. Ms. Amerson says, I want to turn to your resume. You submitted a resume to the prosecution called a curriculum vitae. Is that correct? Yes. And it consists of 2 pages. It's kind of short for a curriculum vitae. Yes. I don't have a clean copy of that. I don't know if do we let me show you this and eventually we'll get a clean copy to mark as an exhibit. But do you have a clean copy, Mr. Levin? Thank you. I'd like to mark this next in order. The court says 206. Ms. Abramson says, thank you, Your Honor. And this appears to be an identical copy of what you just saw? Yes. I'll leave the exhibit there. Now, just in point of fact, this curriculum vitae does not mention that you are a contract pathologist for the San Joaquin County Coroner's Office, does it? No. Is your work, your contract work with the Joaquin County Coroner's Office, the bulk of your autopsy work? I would say so. So why isn't it on your CV? And it has been the bulk of your autopsy work for 23 years? In the past, yes, ma'am. Is there any reason why you didn't put it on your resume? This is a very abbreviated resume and it lists what I consider the bare essentials. Do you have a less abbreviated version? No, I don't like long resumes. That's your excuse not to include certain experience that might paint you in a biased light? Okay. Now, how recent is this resume? December of 94. I upgrade it every year end. And has your certification status changed since December of 94? No. This would indicate that you are on the American Board of Pathology Special Qualification in Forensic Pathology May 30th, 1984. Is that different than a diplomat? It's the same thing. That means that I'm board certified in forensic pathology. That's the same thing. That's the highest certification you can get in forensic pathology? Yes. And are you a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences? Yes. And what is your level of membership? I'm not sure what they call it. Do you call it provisional member? Yes, I think that's what it is. And that's the entry level membership, correct? Yes. A full member is higher and a fellow is higher still, correct? I think so. I haven't reviewed their membership categories recently. So, according to what you're saying, you are board certified by taking and passing the examination in 1984. Yes. Now, you indicated as of the end of the last year, December 31st, 1994, you had performed 6,220 autopsies. Is that correct? Yes. Those are the autopsies that I performed since I've been in the present job. There are others that I've performed during my training period before that are not included. So this includes the 23 years that you've talked about. Is that correct? Yes. And of those 6,220, you indicated 1,632 were accidents? Correct. I take it since you've given specific numbers here that you keep records of every autopsy you perform. I have a stenopad and I have one page for every case of notes that I make. And then I keep those in a shoebox in my closet at home. Every year I count them up and tally them. This is great. It's so comforting to know that our patient information can just be sitting at home in some on a steno pad in somebody's shoebox. All right. And you also indicated there were 473 self-inflicted homicides. Yes. And you indicated that at that time, at the end of the year, there were 526 homicides. Yes. So I take it the balance, which would be the bulk, are natural deaths? Yes, ma'am. And that's true across the country. The bulk of autopsy work is natural deaths. Right. So the next highest number is accidents. Not in our jurisdiction. The next highest number is usually homicides. Your experience hasn't been that, though. No, currently in our jurisdiction, I do more homicides than self inflicted or accidents. Well, let me see if I understand correctly. Or currently, meaning over what period, what time period? Oh, let's say over the last 3 years. Certainly more homicides than self-inflicted. Probably more accidents than homicides. I've, I'd have to check. So accidents are car crashes and heaters exploding in homes and that kind of thing. Accidents are common, more common than homicides, aren't they? Yes. In some jurisdictions, self inflicted may be higher than homicides. You're saying in your homicides, it's higher, you're saying in your jurisdiction, homicide is higher than self inflicted. Yes. And that's been true for about the past 3 years. Yes, actually, probably longer in our county. Now, how many homicide autopsies have you performed, or autopsies where it was determined that it's a homicide determination rather than an accidental or self inflicted since December 31st, 1994? I'd have to check my records. I don't know. How many autopsies altogether have you performed since December 31st of 94? I don't recall. So when you testified on direct examination that you had performed 7,000, rather 6,220 to, autopsies, you were estimating? Yes, that's my best estimate. To spread that over 23 years, it would appear that you do an average of 300 autopsies a year. Is that correct? I have done up to 300 cases a year. Now I do far fewer than that. All right. If you've done fewer than that, then between December 31st of 94 and December 31st of 95, where we haven't gotten to yet, your total number would still be only 6,500 if you did only 300 this year. That's correct. So you haven't done 7,000 yet. No, I'm sure I have. You've left something out of these totals? That's right. That's what I said earlier. Since you've been working full time as a pathologist, you haven't done 7,000. Would that be a fair statement? Well, I was working full time as a pathologist before these figures were, before the 22 or 23 years ago that these figures started. You're starting with when you've told us you're in your current job. And during the time that I was in this current job, I was taking training in forensic pathology 1 month per year at the top 7 places in the United States. And during those training periods, I did many, many autopsies, none of which were recorded in these figures. So you haven't indicated any of that training in the CV either, have you? No, that's where did you receive your training? First of all, what are the top 7 places in the United States? Well, it depends on what your focus is. I was interested in volume of cases and also in the other aspects of death investigation, such as crime labs and so forth. And for volume one, went to the Los Angeles coroner's office and spent a month there. And we did about 25 autopsies a day, 2 or 3 homicides a day. Another was Manhattan, New York City. As far as gunshot homicides, I thought Detroit would be good, so I spent a month in Detroit. As far as special lab expertise, I went to the Dallas County Medical Examiner's office because they have the crime lab in the same facility. That was a month there as well. Yes, a month in all of those places. And where else? I went to Oakland, California, which has what I consider some of the top forensic pathologists available, and San Francisco. And you spent a month in each of those places? Yes. And when was this? Over the years, starting around 1978 and ending in 84 when I took my boards. And the LA County Coroner's Office, in fact, and the San Francisco Coroner's Office in California actually have a training program for doctors in homicide forensic pathology, don't they? In forensic pathology, yes, ma'am. And would it be fair to say that the doctors who work in those offices have an enormous amount of training and an enormous caseload to learn from? You could say that, yes, ma'am. Would you say that? Not really. No? But you just said that you went to train at these offices in LA because of the volume. Yes. San Joaquin County doesn't have a training program, do they? No. Do you remember that year it was that you trained in LA? I think 1978. And did you know Dr. Golden then? No. And who was the coroner at that time? Dr. Noguchi. And when you trained in New York City, who was the coroner there? Dr. Baden. Ooh, Dr. Baden, the famous Michael Baden. Michael Baden? Yes. And when you trained in Detroit, who was the coroner there? Dr. Spitz. Warner Spitz? Yes. And when you trained in Dallas, who was the coroner there? Dr. Petty. And when you trained in Oakland, who was the coroner there? Well, in Oakland, we're talking about individual pathologists. There's no medical examiner system in Oakland, and it was Dr. Herman and especially Dr. McNee. Paul, Dr. Herman? Yes, ma'am. And in San Francisco, Dr. Stevens. Did you know, Dr. Lawrence, that Dr. Stevens was consulted by the defense 5 years ago on this case? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says, you told me that on the telephone. Ms. Abramson says, and I also told you that Dr. Bodden is a consultant to the defense now, that Dr. Herman is a consultant to the defense now. Mr. Khan says, objection, irrelevant, calls for hearsay. The court says, sustained. Ms. Abramson says, do you know if any other pathologists were contacted by whoever this company was that contacted you about this case before you were contacted? That was a confusing question. The person that called me told me that he had also contacted Dr. Herman. And did he tell you he was told by Dr. Herman that Dr. Herman was consulting with the defense? Objection, calls for hearsay, irrelevant, sustained. Now, in addition to the training that you received on these 1 month residents, if you will, with these various coroners' offices, do you also attend lectures and presentations by various experts in the field of forensics? Yes. And in that regard, have you attended presentations put on by the Institute of Forensic Science in Oakland? Yes. And who's the head of the Institute of Forensic Science in Oakland? Dr. Herman. And who's the criminalist in charge of the laboratory? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. You can answer the question. The witness says Phil Reynolds. Ms. Abramson says, do you know Charles Morton? Yes. And what is Ms. Morton's role with the Institute of Forensic Science? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Have you attended any lectures or seminars put on by Mr. Morton? Objection, irrelevant. Overruled. You can answer the question. Yes. Now, I indicated to you when we spoke who all the experts were that the defense was consulting with concerning the issues that you were going to testify about, did I not? Objection irrelevant, calls for hearsay. Sustained. Ms. Aronson says, I'm not asking for the specifics, Your Honor. It's foundational. The court says it still would be hearsay. Ms. Aronson, that's BS, by the way, because he's not getting into the content and, yeah, or she's not getting into the content. Ms. Aronson says, did you contact anyone else besides the prosecutors here and failure analysis to discuss any aspect of this case? Actually, they contacted me. I didn't contact anybody. All right. Now, of the 526 homicides that you had listed as of December 31st, 1994, how many of them had to do with gunshot wounds? Certainly the majority. I would just be guessing without checking my records, but I would say probably two-thirds, maybe 60%. And of that two-thirds, and I will try to do the math this quickly, how many had to do with shotgun wounds? A minority. I would say I've probably done, I was thinking about this the other day, I've probably done somewhere around 100 shotgun homicide cases. And in how many of those shotgun homicide cases were there multiple wound areas indicating more than one blast, to use your term? Like these cases, or do you mean just more than one? Start with more than one. More than one is unusual. Excuse me. My throat's getting dry. Hold on a second. All right, the witness says more than one would be unusual. Most of them are a single shot because they're usually all it takes. I would say that a few of them would involve two shots and even less would involve three, such as a shootout or something like that. That's about it. So is it fair to say you've never yourself performed an autopsy on a decedent that had the number of shotgun produced wounds that these decedents had? 9 times? No, I've never done one like that. Have you ever done autopsies on shotgun victims where there were multiple victims? Yes. And you've done the autopsies on all of the victims? Yes. And how many victims and have you done these serially on one right behind the other? Yes. And how many have you done how many have you done that? Only one time that comes to mind now, but I would have to check my files to see if there were others. So, the one time that you did that, how many wounds did each of the victims sustain? I don't remember. But in any event, three was the most you had ever seen. Is that correct? To the best of my recollection. Again, I would have to check my records. I'm almost sure I have not done anything involving more than three. Do you know if you ever testified in any criminal trial for the multiple shotgun wound autopsies that you performed? I don't recall. I probably did if the perpetrators were caught. But you don't actually have a recollection of that. No. Now, before you testify in a courtroom concerning an autopsy that you have performed, do you review the photographs? Not always. Are some autopsies, just generally speaking, Dr. Lawrence, more complicated than others? Yes. On the more complicated ones, do you tend to review the photographs? I always do. Would you call these autopsies performed here by Dr. Irwin Golden complicated? Yes, ma'am. Very complicated? Yes. Now it's your understanding that you received autopsy photographs, is that correct? I indeed did receive autopsy photographs. And do you know who took the autopsy? I don't mean the person, I mean agency. Who took the autopsy photographs that you received? No. Did you receive two different kinds, in other words, photographs that had differing appearances from each other concerning the autopsies? Yes. And were you ever given any information by two different kinds, what I'm referring to, just to make sure what we're communicating is one set of photographs that had a white border around the edge of the print and another set of autopsy photographs that didn't have a white border? I don't remember if there was a border. I just remember receiving one packet of high quality photographs from the district attorney's office And then later on, another smaller packet from a different district attorney's office, the Van Nuys office, with a small stack of poor quality photographs. And no one explained to you which was which? No. You did, however, seem to know that there was a camera operator from the police department present who took some of the photographs that you saw. Not really. I actually assumed that because it would be very difficult for a pathologist to be taking the pictures and doing the autopsy at the same time. So normally there's someone there that takes all of these photos. There were a lot of pictures taken. Are you aware of the fact that the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office has photographers who do nothing but take these photographs? The medical examiner didn't do it. The doctor didn't take the photographs. There's a coroner's photographer who takes the pictures. There's a photographer? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. There is a photographer there at the coroner's office, and there was in 1978, and the pathologist himself or herself not infrequently takes pictures. I know that. Or I know I do. I know I do. What? Ms. Abramson says, but you don't know what happened here because you didn't talk to Dr. Golden, correct? That's correct. And no one told you that there was also a photographer from the Beverly Hills Police Department who took a lot of photographs that were sent to you. I was told later by someone during a telephone conversation that the better quality photographs were taken by the Beverly Hills PD. And in the display of photographs that Mr. Khan was using with you yesterday, do you know which ones of those were from the coroner's photographer and which ones were from the Beverly Hills Police Department photographer? No. Now, you testified concerning your background that you spent a period of time in the United States Navy. Is that correct? Yes. And you were a medical officer. I was a flight surgeon. And you said you treated pilots and their families? That's correct. And and you did surgery exclusively? No, the term flight surgeon means a general practitioner who takes care of pilots but has special expertise in areas that involve aviation medicine, such as ear, nose, and throat, ophthalmology, and so forth. So you didn't perform surgery. Why call them a surgeon if they're not performing surgery? He says, I did minor surgery from time to time, that's all. I take it you didn't do any surgery involving wounds caused by combat? No. And your stint in the Navy was how long? 2.5 years. And where were you stationed? First in Pensacola for my 6-month training, and then at NAFL Centro in the California desert. At a base? Yes. So you said you served your residency at the Mayo Clinic before 1970 and 1973? That's correct. And a residency in pathology? Yes. Now, what is the difference between pathology and forensic pathology? Everyone who's a forensic pathologist first has to go through general pathology training, and then if he or she takes an extra year in forensic pathology, then can become board certified in the subspecialty of forensic pathology. And what is forensic pathology? It's pathology dealing mainly with autopsies and cases involving the legal system, such as these. Not all pathologies involve autopsies, correct? No, ma'am. A lot of it actually has to do with laboratory work and hospital work, which is what I spend most of my time doing. So when you say spend most of your time doing laboratory and hospital work, what do you do exactly in that regard? I direct the laboratory in the hospital and am responsible for the people that do the blood testing and direct the blood bank and spend the majority of my day reading surgical pathology specimens, which are specimens or biopsies that have been removed from people. Tissue is removed from somebody and sent to a pathologist who then does a gross examination and a microscopic examination and dictates a report with a diagnosis. I guess the most common thing for a layperson is biopsies on tumors that are suspected of being cancerous. Yes, we do frozen sections. That is, when the person is asleep, we do a quick section and see if it's cancer and help the surgeon to decide what operation to do. So, a large portion of pathology work doesn't have to do with determining cause of death. That's more the function of forensic pathology. Yes, ma'am. Okay. First of all, when you reviewed these photographs, when you reviewed the autopsy report, did you generate anything, any notes? No. Before you issued your report, did you view the illustrations that we've been referring to here from failure analysis? No, I'm sorry. Yes, I saw them, but I didn't have them available at the time I made the report. In other words, I saw them. I went and had a meeting with or with Mr. Grewal and saw the illustrations at that time during that meeting, and then several days later, back in my office, wrote the report, but I did not have a copy of those illustrations. Now, you had testified yesterday morning that you had been fooled before at shotgun wounds. How were you fooled? I would have to see the context of what I said yesterday to put it in I think we were talking about direction. Let me get to that part. I noted it. I believe you were talking about ante-mortem versus post-mortem. You had just described hemorrhaging along the wound path of an arm wound. You said, I've been fooled. You mentioned hemorrhages and shredded muscle looking for abnormal dark purple red color. It was in that context. Yes. How have you been fooled before? What I was trying to indicate is sometimes postmortem wounds can look antemortem if there's still some pressure left in the blood vessels. And I remember a case where there was a wound that looked bloody and hemorrhagic to me. And then when I completed the autopsy, I realized that it had to be postmortem wound because of the nature of the other wounds. So I was fooled by that. That's all I was referring to. And we're okay. Okay, and that was a shotgun wound or no? Yes. Now you wrote a report dated October 20th, 1955, correct? Yes. And after indicating what the report is, that it was a preliminary report, after indicating what you reviewed, you posed a question, did you not? Yes. And the question you posed was, were the bodies moved after death? Correct. And did you pose that question? Someone in one of the phone conversations told me, I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, told me that there was a thought that the bodies were, that they had been moved, else their lives had been taken, shot, and then moved elsewhere into the position that they were found. So there was a thought that the bodies were moved. That's what you were told? That's the sense of what I remember. And who had this thought? Were you told who had this thought? As I say, I don't remember who told me or who they say had the thought. Well, whoever told you, you start your report with this question. So, did you answer that with the important question to answer? No, I thought it was important to dismiss that, which was to me a rather absurd concept. Other than that, I didn't think it was more important or less important than anything else. Do you think that's an absurd concept that bodies can be moved? I can't say that. I said that it's an absurd concept that these bodies were moved after they were shot. So, your opinion is that these bodies were not moved after they were shot? They were not. Not at all, correct? Not at all. By the way, were you ever given the reports generated by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Crime Lab concerning this crime scene? No. Are you aware of the fact that there were reports and, in fact, testimony from members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Laboratory at the last trial? Objection calls for hearsay and speculation. Sustained. Ms. Abramson says, were you ever given any information indicating testimony or reports by members of the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Crime Lab? I did receive a report, a brief report after the other materials, and I don't recall where I received it from, in which I think it was an expert for the LAPD, or rather Los Angeles Sheriff's Office Crime Lab, who did talk about the bodies having been moved. And now that I have refreshed my memory, that was my source of. Where's that report? You didn't. I don't have it with me today. I forgot about it. It's your recollection that that report indicated that the bodies had been moved. As I recall, it implied at least one of the bodies had been moved. I think it was Jose. Mr. Menendez? Yes. In fact, what that report indicated was only that the head had been moved slightly to the right, wasn't it? That wasn't my understanding as I read it. Miss Abramson says, Your Honor, I have a 2-page report. May I mark it next in order? The court says 207. She says, Dr. Lawrence, I'm showing you a 2-page document. I ask you to look it over and tell me if you recognize it as anything you've ever seen before. Yes, this is the report that I was talking about a minute ago. And that's a report written by Mr. Ron Linhart, a criminologist at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office, correct? Yes. You didn't talk to Mr. Linhart? No. Did you know what questions had been asked by Mr. Linhart that generated his report? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Did you know who had gotten Mr. Linhart involved in the investigation in this case? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Did you ask any of the people that you were talking to, the prosecutors, the people of the failure analysis, whether anyone was claiming in this trial that the bodies were moved after death? No, I remember discussing it on perhaps 2 occasions when someone on the phone about with someone on the phone about this, and the fact that I thought it was incorrect. But as far as asking them questions about it, no. Well, I discussed this report with you on the phone. Do you remember? That's probably one of the occasions I was thinking of. And I also told you nobody was asserting that the bodies were moved here. Let me have that report back. I'd like to read it. Didn't I tell you Mr. Linhart has not been called as a witness in this case? Objection, irrelevant, sustained. Now, what Mr. Linhart said in this report, I would object it calls for hearsay and it's irrelevant. The court says, could we have a little foundation, find out where he got the report? Where did you get the report? I don't recall. Did anyone send you materials other than the district attorneys? No. Failure analysis sent their packet of illustrations. And did failure analysis send you this report as well, or do you believe you got this from the district attorney's office? I'm sorry, I don't remember what source it came from. He really has a memory problem with where he's getting his evidence from. So it could have come from failure analysis. It could have. Or it could have come from the district attorney's office. Yes. And do you recall this report was dated July 15th, 1993? Objection, calls for hearsay and irrelevant. Sustained. Now, your report indicates your opinion based on the scene photographs that both victims were seated side by side at one end of the couch during the shootings. Is that right? Yes, at least at the beginning of the shooting. My question, so you're not saying that during the entire course of the shootings they were seated side by side? No, ma'am. She jumped up and tried to get away. She jumped up and tried to get away. They teach you mind reading when they train you as a pathologist as well. Is that true? Mind reading of the dead? No, ma'am. That's a great question. I'm surprised that wasn't objected to, but that was great. So you don't know what she did, do you? Or why? Yes, I could. Based on my experience with many homicides and gunshot victims, I know what they tend to do, and the scene supports that. Really? Is that what medical doctors are supposed to do? Speculate on what people are thinking? Objection, argumentative. Sustained. That shouldn't have been sustained. Let me ask you something else. You use the word in your report and in your testimony here, grotesque, to describe one of the wounds, did you not? Yes, that would be the head wound of Joseph or Jose Menendez. Are you aware, Dr. Lawrence, that lawyers have a legal dictionary? It's called Black's Law Dictionary. Objection, irrelevant. The court says sustained as to the preface. Ms. Abramson says, do doctors have a medical dictionary? Yes, they do. Does the word grotesque appear as a medical term? It's not a medical term. I pointed that out in the last stream that he never should be saying grotesque. It's not a medical term, and it's only there to elicit some kind of emotion. It's an emotional, judgmental term. No, not for me. Bullshit. She's absolutely right. Were you shocked by these pictures that you saw in this case? No. You weren't horrified? No, ma'am. They don't have an emotional resonance for you? Not really. No, you're a pathologist, right? Yes. You see this all the time. I do. But you recognize that jurors may find them shocking and horrifying because they don't see such things all the time. Even grotesque. Yes, ma'am. And jurors may be moved by the word grotesque, mightn't they? Yes. Is that why you used it to influence the jury? No, ma'am. It's the easiest way to say a lot with one word. To say a lot of emotional things with one word. There are emotional aspects of it, and my job is to describe things in a way that communicates well to the jury. Really? You're supposed to say non medical terms to describe things to the jury? How many times, Dr. Lawrence, have you testified for a criminal defendant? I have no way of knowing. It would be a lot. How do you have no way of knowing? Don't you know who's hired you? I would have to check my files. When was the last time you testified on behalf of a criminal defendant? I don't recall. I would have to check my records. Too long ago? No, ma'am, probably quite recently. Are you being paid, by the way, for your work in this case? For my time, yes, ma'am. And who's paying you? The district attorney's office. And what is your rate that you are charging the DA's office? 150 per hour. That's cheap. Inflation. I wonder what that is now. Now I have to know because inflation. So hold on one second. Let me do the math. All right, so that would make his rate now about $305 an hour. So it's still kind of low for a whatchamacallit, an expert, but it's probably within normal range. Um, but anyways, so there you go. Inflation. I have to know. Those things bother me. Like $150 an hour. Like that's nothing today. All right. And is that the same rate that you charge the county of San Joaquin? Yes. Now, you also indicate in your report that it is your opinion that Mrs. Menendez rolled forward and fell to her right side. That's correct. Okay, and that sentence comes immediately after the first sentence that they were seated side by side at one end of the couch during the shootings, correct? Yes. So it's your opinion that after being seated side by side, Mrs. Menendez then rolled forward, landing on her right side. She tried to flee, and I'm going to object to that, Ms. Abramson says, and move to strike as beyond his or anyone else's knowledge and non responsive. The court says objection sustained as to it not being responsive. You may re ask the question. Ms. Abramson says, you said she rolled forward. Would you show me what rolled forward looks like? I can't do it in this box, and I don't want to knock the speaker down again. Again. The speaker is down. Why don't you open the door so you don't hurt yourself? And I'm not asking you to fall to the floor, but I would like you to demonstrate, if you would, what is a rolling motion forward, if you can. There could be many ways that she ended up there where she was. She could have leapt up and collapsed. She could have rolled off the couch. Okay, but you just testified to two separate things, and now you're saying that those each could have caused her to land where she was. So which did she do? She couldn't have done both. This guy. Ms. Amerson says, I'm going to object is non-responsive. Motion to strike. Witness says, I can't do what you're asking me to do. There are many possibilities. Which one do you want me to do? The court says, the objection to the question that you asked before is overruled. Ms. Amerson says, the one that you described, that you chose to describe in your report where you wrote she rolled, R-O-L-L-E-D, forward and fell to her right side. That's what I would like you to do. If you can demonstrate it. If you cannot, you cannot. I could demonstrate it, but not here. There's no couch, there's no room to really do it, and I'm wearing a nice suit, and I'd rather not. Okay. So you don't know how she rolled off the couch. You did not say she stood up and then fell down, did you? Pardon me? You did not say she stood up and then fell down? No, but she could have. You didn't say that. Your opinion was she rolled forward. Objection, argumentative, overruled. In in that report, I said she rolled forward. A minute ago, I said she jumped up and tried to get away. She could have stood up and fallen. There are many possibilities. Rolling forward, Dr. Lawrence, would you agree, connotes someone basically falling, as I am demonstrating now, and then landing on the floor. The jury can see. I don't care if the audience can't. Yes, that's rolling forward. Standing up, on the other hand, looks like standing up, doesn't it? And then falling down. Yes. And then falling down? Court says, do you want to demonstrate that one? Ms. Abramson says, certainly, Your Honor, if I think it's important, but by the time this is over, I will have probably demonstrated a lot of strange things, okay? Now, you also went on in the report to say that Jose Menendez remained seated in the same position where he was shot. Is that your opinion? Yes, he wasn't seated elsewhere on the couch or on the floor and then moved to the couch and so forth. That's what I meant to say. That's all you meant by the same position? Yes, obviously. Remember, as we're going through this, keep in the back of your mind that the state is saying they were seated. Obviously, that's what they're contending. But the defense and the brothers both testified that the parents were standing up when they entered the room. They were standing in between the couch and the coffee table, engaged in some kind of conversation, perhaps plotting to do something to punish the brothers for coming out and, you know, outing the family secret. So they were standing, and that would absolutely explain for why there was blood on the bottom of Kitty's shoe, because she probably stumbled and fell in her own blood, and why there's a wound to the back of Jose's elbow, and there's no wound to the couch, or no damage to the couch because he was standing when it happened. But that's just what makes the most sense to me. But the state wants to tell you that they were seated and she stood up and ran, or she fell, or we don't know, which is reasonable doubt that the state doesn't understand their own theory. All right, so where did I leave off? She says, is that your opinion? Yes, he wasn't seated elsewhere on the couch and then moved to the couch and so forth. That's what I meant to say. So that's all you meant by the same position. Yes, obviously. There's no question pending. The court says he can finish his answer. The witness says his head was obviously in a different position when he was shot, and now it's off to the side once he's dead. Ms. Abramson says, so clearly his head was not in the same position in which he was found at the time that he was shot in the head? That's correct. Now, just to clarify, the X-ray looking things that were shown to you during Mr. Khan's examination, to your knowledge, those are photographs of X-rays, correct? Yes. And what you were provided with were photographs of X-rays, not the actual X-rays? Correct. Now it is obvious from the scene photographs, is it not, Dr. Lawrence, that Mrs. Menendez was on the floor when the police arrived? Yes. And Mr. Menendez was on the couch when the police arrived? Yes. And from that, and other things that we'll get to, you extrapolate that they started out both sitting side by side. No, ma'am. You don't extrapolate that they started out sitting next to each other, as you've said in that report. Not from that information, no. Not from the scene photographs. From the scene photographs, but not from what I just said. I said, but you extrapolate from the scene photographs and in the other photographs and from the autopsy, from whatever you got, you extrapolated that they started out where she was not in that position, that she was seated on the couch, right? One of the scene photographs shows the evidence that she was seated next to him when the shooting started, and I'd have to use that photograph to explain to the jury what I'm talking about. I think I have something else that you might find helpful in that regard. There's something on the couch that informs your opinion on that matter, does there not? Yes, I explained it to you on the telephone. Right, and I'm going to pull out that picture for you if you'll just be patient. Let's start with this. Your Honor, I have two photographs. What I'll do is they're in plastic and I'll keep them there, but I'll slide them out and put a number on the photograph itself. Let me show one of them to counsel because it's an enlargement. We're at 208. The court says yes. Ms. Aronson says 208, and then the enlargement. Well, first of all, showing you 208, do you recognize that to be one of the photographs of the scene that you were supplied by the prosecution? Yes. And does that photograph show an area on the couch adjacent to, next to where Mr. Menendez's body has been found? Yes. Now showing you 209, do you see 209 to be an enlargement of a particular area of that adjacent couch cushion? Yes. Let's put this up. Now, Dr. Lawrence, in the top photograph, 208, calling your attention to this cushion, the one the ones that in this photograph, the number 4 and the number 6 on it. Do you see these red areas on the edge of the cushion, the sort of facing edge, the top edge, and then down below the skirt area of the couch? Yes. These are the photographs that show that evidence that she was seated next to him at the time at least one of the shots was fired, and you can see the blood stains and then the blank places on either side where her thighs protected the couch from the blood. So you're extrapolating that her knees were protecting the couch from the blood? Yes. Are these drops or are these smears? They're splatter. And I think also probably some smear. I really can't tell. Okay. I think some of it is a high velocity mist of blood that settled onto the couch. A high velocity mist that seemed to have left certain ridge areas empty. That's probably a smear there, but that's a smear. That's something bloody coming in contact with that edge of the couch, correct? Yes. And it's in the area where normally a person sitting on the couch would have a leg. Yes. So it could be a bloody leg smearing along the edge of the couch, couldn't it? Yes, it could. Her bloody leg, couldn't it? It could be. And for her bloody leg to be leaving a smear on the couch, it would mean that she was shot in her leg while she was on or near the couch, wouldn't it? If that came from her leg, yes, it would. So hypothetically, if she were shot in her leg while on or near the couch and then that leg came in contact with the couch cushion, it could leave the smear, correct? It would probably leave a lot more blood. Well, it just depends on how much blood is coming out of that part of the leg, wouldn't it? Yes, but the nature of those injuries to her legs would produce a great deal of bleedings, especially if there were earlier wounds, if she was still alive when she was hit. We're not talking about all the wounds, we're talking about and any wound to her leg. The wounds when she's on the couch would have to be earlier wounds. You don't know how many wounds she received while she was on the couch. She did not receive the leg wounds when she was on the couch based on the direction. May the witness the court says, let's not argue. Let him finish his answer. The witness says, what I was saying is that the leg wound, sorry, would or could not have been received while she was on the couch, as I explained yesterday. Ms. Abramson says, if you're right, then she couldn't have been seated on the couch. That's what you can say, correct? Yes. But if you're wrong, all kinds of possibilities open up, correct? Yes. Now let's just assume, hypothetically, that one possibility is that she was shot in one place on the leg, not all of those leg wounds while she was on the couch, and then either stood up or slid off the couch and the leg came in contact with the cushion. All right? The only leg wound that could have been that could have been while she was on the couch would be a perforating wound on her left thigh, and that would not be in the area we're talking about. If she did what you said, rolled or slid off the couch, if she did what you just did now, that area would not be in contact. Dr. Lawrence, if you're going to argue, we're going to be here a long time. Objection, Your Honor. The court says, let's not talk to the witness. If you have an objection, you state it to the court. Miss Abramson says, was she wearing pants? Yes. Does blood drip? Blood can drip, yes. Does blood ooze? It does. Does blood stain? It does. And can a stain be transferred from pants to couches? Certainly. Now, if you look at the area in the enlarged photograph there, 209, where these stains appear, there's a blank area between the edge of the cushion and the skirt part of the couch. Correct. Do you have an explanation for that? One explanation would be that the cushion was a little bit further out when the blood smear when the blood was smeared there, or because of the contour of the lower cushion, it may curve inward and therefore protect that area. So something that curves inward and is not in a straight line with the leg or with whatever it is that came in contact with this would or could remain clean. I'm not sure this is a real smear. It may be a spray that's settled. So you're not a blood spatter expert, I take it? I'm not. Mr. Morton is, however. The witness says one of the jurors can't see. Unidentified juror says, thank you. Ms. Abramson says, I'm sorry. You know, Mr. Morton is a blood spatter. Mr. Khan, objection, calls for hearsay, sustained. Ms. Abramson says, so you're not a blood spatter expert. So now you don't know if that's a smear or a spatter or spray. That's correct. You think it has something to do with her being on the couch? If you look at this photograph on the top, you can see the same thing where he's sitting. You can see right between their legs, the blood is there, and where their legs are, the blood is not. I'll show you an enlargement and see if you can repeat that statement. Objection, argumentative. Court says the response of counsel is stricken and is not a question, just a statement. Ms. Amerson says, now, let's just focus on what you thought you saw here when you wrote your report. You thought this smear, as you describe it, was caused by her being shot while on the couch, correct? I didn't quite say that. She was seated next to him at some time when blood spray went flying through the air when someone was shot. So you're not even saying it's her blood. Right. How do you know she was seated there when it happened? There could have been a third person, but I doubt it. What? So now you're saying there could have been a third person that somehow miraculously didn't get shot and left a imprint of themselves on the couch to protect it from the blood spatter from Jose and Kitty. What? Are we serious right now? That's insane. This is almost as crazy as the engineer, Dr. Welcher, in the Karen Reed case saying that Karen's Lexus could have just flown into space. It's a possibility, but not probable. Wow. Okay, let's move on. So Ms. Abramson says, no, no, I'm saying, are you affiliating that blood smear with Mrs. Menendez? I'm saying that somebody was seated there, and that's why the blood has the pattern that we can see where the leg protected the couch, and in between the legs and on either side, the blood is there. Well, so you're saying the only reason that you believe she was seated on the couch is because there's this white space on either side of the stain. Is that what you're saying? Well, her body. Also, the fact that her body was found on the floor, and I would be very surprised if she were lying on the floor when she was first shot, simply because of the direction of the other shots. You're speculating that she was on the couch? Objection, argumentative. Overruled. You're speculating that she was on the couch. Well, I guess you'd call it speculation, but has some basis behind it. Well, you're not saying that you believe that this is her blood. Is that correct? I don't know whose blood that is. Well, do you think it's his blood, Mr. Menendez's blood? It could well be from the explosive mist when he was shot in the back of the head. So blood from the back of his head would have proceeded forward and fallen between her legs. That's what you're saying. Yes, ma'am, it could. What? Oh, this has gone off the rails for this expert. So you don't think that's her blood and you don't think she smeared that? I don't know whose blood it is. I mean, that's a fair enough statement, but you cannot, unless it was tested, but you cannot say that it was coming from behind the couch forward and falling backwards. That's not how physics works. But if it's her blood, that means she was shot in the couch, correct? Yes. And isn't that in fact what you're suggesting in your report? No. Excuse me, let me just finish the question. That they were seated side by side on the couch during the shooting. At the beginning of the shooting, yes, ma'am. All right. And that she rolled forward and fell to the right side and rolled. Yes. And did you assume that she was shot when she did that? Or do you assume she just rolled forward and fell without being shot? She was probably shot. Was she probably bleeding or was she probably not? Hard to say. It would depend. If it was the shot to her left breast, she may not have been bleeding enough to stain the couch. So you don't then associate that stain on the couch as any proof that she was seated there. Is that correct? I don't understand your question. Well, the only evidentiary value that stain on the couch has for you is that you opine that her legs were on either side of that stain. In essence, yes. In other words, if one looks at the couch, it is evident that somebody was sitting there when blood was rained onto the couch. It's evident because there's blood in one place but not in the next place. Yes. What if she was sitting with her legs up on the couch? I don't think it was based on what we see here. So you're trying to be very specific and accurate, aren't you? What we're talking about here is not very scientific, but more common sense. So you're using your common sense and not your expertise as a medical doctor, is that correct? Both. Well, let's talk about what you used when you placed this little thing in this little doll. This is 205, correct? Yes. All right. Now you told us that you made 205. At least you put the sticks in it, the rods. This is the little doll that he has, that he put the rods in for trajectory or whatever. Did you purchase this mannequin somewhere? Yes. Where did you get it? Aaron Brothers Art Store. And is this something you routinely use in order to illustrate your autopsy findings? Not routinely, but on occasion. And when you place these various rods, what information were you using to direct your placement of the rods to tell you where to put them? The autopsy reports and the photographs. Now, when you were testifying on direct examination, I believe you indicated that this rod going into the doll's leg, which is supposed to represent an injury you described to Mrs. Menendez, was placed incorrectly. Is that right? Yes. And putting Exhibit 200 back on the board, Exhibit 200 illustrates the wound that your rod is supposed to illustrate, correct? Part of it, yes, ma'am. And the wound that's depicted in number 200. By the way, what number wound is that in Dr. Golden's report? I don't know. I'd have to check his report. Why don't you do that? The witness does. He says it's wound number 7. That Dr. Golden describes as a shotgun wound to the left hip thigh, correct? Yes. And that wound, even in the photographs, sometimes hard to see. But this is the kneecap, correct? Yes. So he tried to do it lower into the kneecap so it fits the mafia theme for the prosecution. Wow. Just wow. That's amazing. Like, I'm seeing the shadiness really unfold as we talk to this witness because he's one of their key witnesses. They didn't call their regular pathologist, the one who did the autopsy. So they called this guy who happens to be. Oh, hold on one second. Sorry, we had the dog needed to go out. I had to rush to get her outside. All right. I don't remember where I left off. Something about the kneecap. I can't believe that he's bringing in this mannequin now with to show like the trajectory of the wounds. He uses rods, but yet he's sticking the rods in the wrong places, in places where the wounds are not, like the kneecap, so that the prosecution can claim, oh, they kneecapped him. This is bogus, totally bogus. And this is where Nathan Hockman keeps getting the whole kneecap thing. This witness who is their star witness, basically, and didn't even do the autopsy himself. All right, so here we go. And so this is an area on the outer aspect of the thigh, like here. Yes. And the side of the thigh, lateral? Correct. Okay, lateral means side, doesn't it? Yes, in medical Latin, in medical and English, he says. So lateral means, and this is a, so lateral means side, and this is a wound on the side. And the other part of the wound is higher up, and it's a series of individual defects on the front of the thigh. With one large defect as well, yes. So the one I'm showing shows the wrong direction on the doll. It could go down, more downward. Okay, well, it goes this way, a line like this, correct? Yes, ma'am. And you have shown it with a line like that, the opposite direction. Yes. So this is wrong? Yes. Okay. And in fact, the little rod even comes out in back. The back is wrong too. It really should be from top to side. It should be. It should come out a little bit lower and a little bit more to the side. So it should be. Why don't you make a circle where it really should be, where the exit really should have been, or what you're calling the exit? The witness does so. So you've drawn with blue ink on the doll's leg a little dot where the exit should be instead of behind the leg and farther up where you've put the rod, correct? Yes. Now, how do you know which is the entrance and which is the exit on that particular wound? There are pellet marks associated with the entrance wounds, which are abrasion collars indicating an entrance. Well, does the fact that there are abrasion collars on the wound on the top of the thigh that tells you it's the entrance wound? That tells you it's the entrance wound? And the appearance of the wound. I relied on Dr. Golden's description and interpretation of the wounds, and I feel comfortable it is an entrance wound. So, in other words, with respect to this wound, you accepted Dr. Golden's observations, Dr. Golden's description, and Dr. Golden's conclusion. Yes. On this one? Yes, ma'am. So Dr. Golden wrote it in his report that the entrance, I'm now putting up on the board 186. This is the same wound showing the top of the thigh part as well. Yes, I think so. So you testified before that it was. It is. All right, the leg's very deformed. It has bends in places that a normal leg wouldn't have. Is that correct? Yes. And that's because the bones are broken? Yes, ma'am. So the leg moves and twists in abnormal ways. Yes. And what are we looking at in this photograph on the lower left-hand part of the photograph? The same wound that we see in the center. I believe this is 200. Yes. And then on the top, towards the top of the photograph, we see a whole series of individual holes. Is that correct? Yes. Now, how deep is that wound? It went through and through. It went from top, if I can use the marker, it went from top to side, correct? Yes. And how far under the surface was the wound path? Well, the length from entrance to the exit wound, is that what you're talking about? No. How deep under the surface of the skin did the projectiles traverse? Do you know? I would have to estimate. There's no way of really telling from the photographs. But the person who dissected that wound might know. Like the person who did the autopsy, who isn't on the stand right now, who should be. I'm not sure if he actually opened it up. Let me read his report to refresh my memory. I don't know what the report says. Uh, I don't know that the report says it. Then we can't say. So you didn't talk to him? No. If I were to give you a hypothetical that Dr. Golden would testify that that wound is only about an inch under the surface from one end to the other, okay, does that in any way inform your opinion about what's the entrance and what's the exit? Objection, calls for speculation, no foundation, assumes facts, not an evidence. Ms. Abramson says it's hypothetical. The court says, all right, just assuming that that was the situation. The witness says it would not change anything. What if I were to offer you a hypothetical that Dr. Golden would testify that his report is mistaken in this context and that on reviewing this wound, he has determined that the entry is actually the large defect and the smaller defects are exit holes? Mr. Khan says, I would object, calls for hearsay and no foundation, and it assumes facts, not an evidence. The court says, all right, just assuming that that was Dr. Golden's opinion. The witness says, then I would give that great weight. Ms. Abramson says, if, let me ask you this, the inside of a limb, a human limb, whether it's an arm or a leg, is not hollow, is it? No. The skin is sort of like the casing, if you will, on a sausage. It holds solid content, correct? Yes. And in a leg, for example, inside the casing of the skin, one would find bone, correct? Yes. One would find muscle. Yes. One would find blood vessels in various sizes and types. Correct. One would find ligaments. Yes. And one would find fat of varying thickness. Yes. Then, over that would be the structures that comprise the skin, which have a certain number of levels themselves, correct? Yes. But inside, if it's all full up with stuff, basically, when you start out. It is. All right. When a projectile hits a limb and starts going through it, right? It engages with these tissues and structures and bones, or can, correct? It must. Right, because there's no hollow spaces in there, there's no pathway it can go through by itself, correct? That's right. All right, now if this had been the entry wound, the holes on the top of the thigh can you tell from the photograph and from Dr. Golden's measurements that the span of that wound is much wider, larger than the span, the diameter, if you will, of the lower wound? What I think you're saying is that the diameter of the cluster of wounds here is greater than the diameter of the single hole there. Exactly. I'd say it's a little larger, yes. And he describes it as larger, correct? Yes. So for this to be the entry wound, somehow these projectiles all would have had to have come together to come out one hole, wouldn't they? Yes, in essence. That's really quite unlikely, isn't it? Yes. So, I mean, if you take all these separate pieces and you put them in, there's nothing inside the body that's going to make them come together, to narrow down and pop out a smaller hole together, correct? It's unlikely. All right, so it actually makes more rational sense, logical sense, common sense to see that the entry wound is on the top of the thigh and the exit wound is on the lateral portion, lower portion, correct? I'd like to review the other photographs before I would agree to that statement. All right, I'll give you an opportunity to do that. The court says, let's do that during the recess. Ms. Aronson says, exactly, and we'll be in recess until 1:45. Thank you, Your Honor. Recess was taken, and that is where I am going to leave you today. So we will continue with Dr. Lawrence back on the stand in tomorrow's episode or stream or whatever you call it. Um, so I will see you guys then. Please don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, do all the YouTubey things, and I will see you tomorrow. Thank you guys for watching. Take care. Bye now.